Something that Warhammer players are always looking forward to is the inevitable release of another set of Aspect Warriors, or just new models in general, as there's some miniatures that have been waiting far too long. But the wait is over, as we have a new box sent by Games Workshop, and we're going to tuck in. We have new Scouts and new Striking Scorpions.
We're going to compare them to their previous iterations and have a look over the history of these models and just see why they took so long to get an update. This video is sponsored by my personal favorite mobile game, Tacticus, who have just released the Adeptus Mechanicus into the game, and I'm also super hyped for that, so more on that later in the video. But for now, it's tabletop time!
Eldar have for a long time been a joke to the ever keenly anticipated question, which unit are we going to see updated next? As some of their active range have been on the shelves for 30 years almost now. But finally, one of my favorite units in all of 40k has just been given a breath of fresh life. But first, a little bit of history. In 1987, a movie called Predator was released in theaters and would feature a dangerous alien humanoid of such vivid design and characterful brutality that it would remain in our minds and pop culture to this very day. It would spawn many alternate designs and loving fan art, including only 1 year after its release in 1988, in which Jez Goodwin was tackling the brand new and burgeoning Space Elves range for Warhammer 40,000. And one model in particular stood out from the others. Sporting an angry chainsaw, dreadlock-like plume of hair, and a snarling visage, Yavin Pureheart strikes an impressive similarity to the Predator, forming the inspiration for what would surely become the Striking Scorpions we know and love today. Okay, so I've finished building the Striking Scorpion Exarch here, and it's looking really cool. And I'll take this moment now it's primed to compare it to something. One of my older Striking Scorpions from the 2006 range. Now, when anyone thinks of the Striking Scorpion, I think the most striking aspect of them would be their mask featuring the Mandiblasters, these terrifying signature weapons that are mounted either side of their jaw. And to Games Workshop's credit, the designs for the Mandiblaster have become even more refined, and I very much like the changed proportions of the faceplate. So on that account, I am really happy with this new refined model, the signature melee weapon of the Striking Scorpions. It looks like the design team has put an extra bit of effort into looking at how this gauntlet could have operated, how the interlocking plates could interact, as well as the angle at which they would be positioned. So far, 2 big thumbs up from me. I really like the crisper designs and the shapes, and the proportions are also really, really nice. I like this update. However, there's one issue that I'm not so happy about, and that is the back of the helmet. The thing that's missing is the overbearing mass of dreadlocks the older Striking Scorpion models had. Now, the new models still have some of this, but it's a lot smaller, and it appears more like a few tassels blowing in the wind than this huge primal mane, again tying back to the Predator. However, as I mentioned the Predator, it's very obvious that this is probably the reason that they changed the design. Games Workshop really likes to solidify their IP, trying to make this IP very much their own. A lot of old Warhammer is really just modeled off old pop culture stuff. Let's look at the Tyranids, straight out of Alien. But over time, they've developed their own identity and come into their own. So while I understand why they removed such a bulk of these dreadlocks, I think it gave a lot of character and, most importantly, silhouette to these Striking Scorpions. But now, while I've been poking around with the Striking Scorpions, I know Dave has been interested in having a look at the new SCOUTS sprue. So let's see what he thinks about those updated models.
So Murray has had the joy of the Striking Scorpions to dive into, but this new Kill Team Salvation box also brings back Space Marine Scouts. These models have also been waiting a very long time for an update. The current plastic Scout kit came out in 2005, making it 18 years old. Space Marine Scouts are synonymous with the Scouts. In fact, the first iteration of them came out in 1989 in Rogue Trader. Back then, they had a much more Roman aesthetic with some of these leather tassels and the curved and bonded plate armor that looks a little bit like muscle plate. These Scouts bear almost no resemblance to those that came after, but they do show that as a concept, Scouts have been around since Warhammer 40k has existed. Scouts would see their major redesign in 2nd edition in 1997, receiving a range of metal models with shotguns, bolters, and sniper rifles. These models are gorgeously heavily detailed, and while they're not something I've seen shown off that often, I think they're really showcasing the height of metal miniature production of the 90s. And it was these metal scouts that would hold the line for the Space Marine armies for the next 8 years until that plastic replacement and until today, the current kit for Space Marine scouts. What I do find really interesting here is that the design aesthetics of these two iterations stayed pretty much the same. However, in my personal opinion, the 1997 sculpts for scouts are actually far superior in almost every way. The plastic sculpt scouts have chunky detail and strange proportions. They look a lot like the Toy Soldiers movie that I remember from my childhood. They have these giant heads and a complete lack of neck. In fact, the metal models also have more bits on them, more grenades, pouches, and accessories, and altogether I think look like higher detailed and more appropriately proportioned models. Speaking of long-awaited factions, our favorite mobile game Tacticus has just released the Adeptus Mechanicus. They're playable in-game now.
If you don't know what Tacticus is, it's an officially licensed Warhammer game. It's a strategy game on your mobile. There's currently over 60 characters from 15 different factions from the universe of 40k for all the different events and modes within the game.
That's right, PvP, PvE, guild tournaments. We actually have a tabletop time guild where we play with our fans and we are striving to get better and better. This is a mobile game that's actually fun, and that's really important, and it's why we've stuck with it. But right now I'm super hyped because the faction I'm ready to start building in 2024 is dropping in the game. I just free-to-play unlocked Actus, the Tech Priest Manipulus, and the Tech Priest Dominus is coming in a legendary event starting in just a couple of days. In January, we've got the third Mechanicus character dropping, which you'll also be able to unlock if you start playing now.
There's seasonal events starting very soon, as well as deals on Christmas Day and Eve. To get those, you're gonna have to download the game and check them out.
That's right, download the game, support the channel, and find out why we at Tabletop Time still play this game every day and have been enjoying it. I mean, we've even got a special channel in our Discord just for chatting about Tacticus. They're a really great bunch of people and it's a cool game, so go check them out.
It's lunchtime, it's time to go play Tacticus.
Yeah, actually, that's right. I gotta grind for this legendary event. The 2005 iteration of Scouts has always bothered me. I've loved Scouts as a concept and how they're presented in the lore, but I've never ever liked these minis, even from when they first came out. To me, they don't really feel like they capture the essence of what Scouts are meant to be. Slightly more diminutive, still developing apprentice Space Marines. Their head sculpts lack a bit of youthfulness, and while Scouts aren't 14-year-old neophytes, they are 18 to 30-year-old Space Marines. And I never felt their chunky proportioned sculpts represented this. The new kit has improved on this drastically. The faces, while creased in battle cries, look a lot more youthful and a little bit more slight. When you put these next to Space Marine heads from other kits, you can tell that they're younger and a bit less experienced. There's less battle scars, no service studs, and altogether more hair. That testosterone really plays havoc with Space Marine male pattern baldness. They're a treat to go together, and the only thing that's really changed here is the weapon options. Going to a kill team, we no longer have things like entire squads of Space Marine scouts with sniper rifles, which I'm sure some people are not going to like. I will say as one final point or a detractor, I really don't actually like the design for the shotguns here. The true scaling of Space Marines and scouts with the Primaris change has led to everything being upscaled, including the shotgun, but there's been no additional detail added to it. So this shotgun kind of just looks like he's carrying around a giant Nerf gun. But other than that minor complaint, I think these models are a great upgrade and certainly a lot better than the 2005 kit. So you've been watching me build, assemble, and paint this model, and it's been quite lovely to paint. I decided to go for a Shield of Avalon. But you didn't think you'd be seeing one of them. My Space Marine Arthurian chapter that, as I said to everyone a while ago, would be something I pull out just when I feel like it. I'm not committing to painting an army, it's a fun little project, and with these new scouts, I thought it'd be cool to imagine a scout. And the way I imagined this was by removing all the heraldry from his armor. He hasn't earned his place under one of the lords. These are a very knightly based faction, and as a scout or an apprentice, he's still finding his way. So he's assigned to a scout company and then given the colors of the company he will be assigned to. And that in this case is green, pairing with the yellow of the chapter. And these are just worn on his undersuit. I was really inspired by Warhammer Fantasy, things like Bretonnian peasants and Landsknecks and all the old medieval colorful garbs of the peasantry. But in terms of personal heraldry, this soldier bears none. He hasn't earned any yet. And that's something I can play with all the Scouts and be really cool to do a bunch of squads if anyone ever did a Shields of Avalon army, where the Scout Squad undersuits are all different colors and represent the different companies they'll head off to. It'll make for a really colorful and fun squad. The paint job was super easy. I used a lot of bright contrast with all of these beautiful colors with a lot of saturation, just scratchily highlighting areas to create some visual punch, and then finished off with a little bit of freehand weathering, as well as the Shields of Avalon chapter symbol and his scout marking and squad number, Squad 7. With all this done, he was done. That's the Scout, and well, the history of Scouts. I'm really glad they remade them, and I'm really glad they didn't change them too much. I look forward to seeing a whole bunch of Scouts in people's armies in the future.
Alright, bit of an unintentional update. We just had an issue, so I decided I'd just give it a quick spray of green. However, it is so humid outside that the aerosol just immediately dried en route to the model, and it just made an absolute mess of the surface of the model. I've just scraped back some of the worst parts of what just happened and just reprimed inside in the corner of the warehouse. The model's fine, it's just a bit frustrating, but we're gonna move forwards, and sometimes stuff just happens. So we'll make the best of it, and I'll console myself by doing some painting now. Now, another question that has been on the mind of many an Eldar fan over the years is, of course, why? Why does it take so long to get nice updated designs to all our favorite miniature ranges? And I think history sort of has an answer for that as well, as when the Eldar, or the Space Elves, were introduced, they were, of course, counterparts of fantasy, as that's what Games Workshop was doing at the time. Their realms of fantasy battles. They simply swapped up the settings and we had humans, dwarves, and elves in space. Of course, accompanied by orcs, at least at the very start. However, as everyone with a meme worth their salt would know, the dwarves, or squats, proved to be less than popular and eventually disappeared from the range and the universe entirely for the time being. And over the years, the popularity of Space Marines has grown significantly, while Eldar, not so much. And a very real and brutal market analysis will tell you that if one army sells, the other one probably isn't going to see as much love. That isn't to say that Eldar weren't popular. They're very popular. It's just that Space Marines are ridiculously popular. Even on our channel here, the Adeptus Astartes feature as the most popular content that we make. So it's no wonder that eventually even the independent character range of Space Marines outnumbered the range of the Eldar. And so from that knowledge, you can probably extrapolate that that's why we don't see as much Eldar as some people may like. But who knows, all that may change, as of course we got the squats back. And if the Eldar continue to see widespread love and support for their models, it stands to reason that we could see a lot more Aspect Warriors and even Phoenix Lords a lot sooner than we might otherwise think. And of course, that brings us to the purpose of this video. At Tabletop Time, we all love Warhammer. We love the lore, we love the models, and so of course we're very positive about Warhammer. But it's also important to be critical and have an opinion. And while I personally prefer some of the older designs of the Striking Scorpions compared to this very new one, I'm extremely happy that it exists, and that hopefully we're going to see more. And if this update of the Striking Scorpions doesn't really do it for you, that's okay. Eventually, they may be updated again, and you may like that one. Just as I'm not personally a fan of the update in the 2000s. I much prefer the 1990s Striking Scorpions. I think they have a lot more character. And then of course we ended up with the redesign in 2006, which is the units I'm most familiar with, as that's about when I started collecting bits of Eldar then. But I'd also love to hear what you all think about the different designs and the history of Striking Scorpions, if not the entire range of Eldar Aspect Warriors. So if you have any thoughts on the designs or even memories of collecting them way back in the Rogue Trader days, I'd love to hear those stories. Now, despite painting both of these Striking Scorpions the same green, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to paint them the same way, as I think it would be really cool to try two different artistic moods to really encapsulate how I feel about each of them. So that of course means starting chronologically with the design released in 2006, the one I'm most familiar with and have a strong connection to. So I'm going to start by mixing a dark jade green in with the base coat and set to shading all of the recesses and under areas, slowly highlighting up to a blast of acidic green using AK's frog green and deep yellow. After that, first and foremost on my mind is contrast. I want to make all the design elements of this stand out really well, especially since I've managed such a really nice and vibrant green. So I'll mix up a very dark grey and add just a touch of red to contrast with the green armor, and I'll apply that over all the areas that are going to be black or metallic. The blacks and steels will be highlighted using greys, and then I opted for a very ruddy brass color, starting with a dark brown, moving up to a burnt orange color, and then rather than going straight to yellow as you would for gold, I used more of an amber, finishing up with spot highlights of icy yellow and pure white. Now when it came to the teeth of the biting blade, I really wanted something that would stand out from the rest of the non-metallic metal. So I actually used a base coat of blue to create a really strong, vivid separation from the rest of the blade, and then used a heavy highlight of pure white to make it really eye-catching. The angry danger arrows I painted with a strong orange, and then layered up to a strong yellow. For a final touch, I picked out all the gems using red. And then we have a really vibrant, old-school striking scorpion. These are the colors that always enter my mind whenever I close my eyes and think of the box art. But wait, we still have one more. I'm gonna have to be honest, the new plastic model is an absolute delight to treat. I said before that the proportions and just the clean lines of new plastic models are fantastic, but actually getting to put paint on the model is absolutely a treat. Definitely a lot better than, say, an old Finecast model. Something that I'd noticed but hadn't really appreciated yet was that the design of the helm now has a bit of a crest at the back, and the Mandiblasters themselves are just a bit more crisp around all the details. So all in all, I think if you're on the fence about whether or not to buy these models as a painting project, they are absolutely worth it. They're fantastic. So I decided to paint this one just a little bit darker and a bit moodier, colder than the previous one, to go more with what I feel when I think about striking scorpions: brooding, scary, striking from the shadows and melting back in. As a bit of added dramatic flair, I decided to do a bit of extra colors into this striking scorpion, and I mottled in some darker blues and jades towards the bottom of the model, as if it's being lit by a creepy, eerie light, as they stalk amongst the shadows, searching for their next prey. It's just a difference of a few color tones, but I think it makes a huge impact visually and emotionally. And while I'm going to have to wait until I finish painting this model to determine, which is my favorite, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on the style that you like more. Because honestly, this is the reason I never got around to painting my striking scorpions. I kept deciding and going back between the two different tones of colors, do I make them bright, do I make them darker, do I do something completely different? And indecision just meant that I never got around to painting them. As a final touch, since I based the new model in exactly the same way as the old one, I decided let's paint them pretty much the same way anyway, just allowing for the colors on this one to be a bit darker and moodier to fit in with the themes of this striking scorpion. And with that done, it's time to take a proper look at all of these models in some reveals. A huge thank you to all of our patrons. It is you that let us produce 2 videos a week and keep on making such crazy projects such as this. We get to convert and paint awesome miniatures and also talk about our thoughts on both the process and their evolving designs within the hobby, as that point of discourse is always relevant and kind of fun to get into. So if you're into that sort of thing, I encourage you to check out the links below to our Patreon, which gives you access to our Patreon Discord channels, as well as being able to participate in our monthly mini review, where we get to look at all the models everyone is currently working on and have just a bit of feedback. And I know that that is always a highlight of the month for all of us. So again, if you want to support us, the links are in the description below. Now, hopefully you enjoyed having a look at the design history and also the new models. Dave, what was your favorite thing about the Space Marines?
My favorite thing about the Space Marines is the better proportions of the new Scouts, and mostly the faces look a bit more in sync and a bit more youthful, which is cool.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement. We really liked the crisp plastic and the new proportions. That's amazing. Real complaint is that I really like the dreadlocks that gave a real big silhouette. But I think if I really wanted to, I could just sculpt those on, wouldn't take long, and I'd have an absolutely awesome mini.
I gotta be honest, I think with the Striking Scorpions, they're cool, they're good models, but they just don't do it for me. I'm sorry, Murray. Like, I love Striking Scorpions, I love the Aspect Warriors. Something about those shifts in proportions have lost the unique character of Striking Scorpions to me. To me, they look like Guardians with a little top knot and some crab claw.
I think it's part of the pose as well. They're just posed like Eldar. They don't have the big hunch and creep.
Yeah. There were some really cool dynamic poses in the old ones, and those dreadlocks looked awesome, and the beads and all that, and the changing those proportions is just, like, they're cool. I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just saying that they don't quite hit that vibe that made me excited about them. So I'm really hoping when the Warp Spiders come out, they don't have tiny warp backpacks and they don't look like Guardians with jump packs, because that'd be sad.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite things were, what your least favorite things were. Let us know your aesthetic for the Aspect Warriors.
Hey Murray, this is the last video we're putting out in 2023.
It is.
So thank you everyone for watching our videos this year. If you're still here, it's been a treat to be able to do this as a job. We're super lucky, super privileged. Thank you to Tacticus for sponsoring us again. Your support really helps us to keep making these videos, and I'm kind of super into the game, so suits me. And finally, for those who are following along, the Epic board is not going away. We just film a lot of projects concurrently. We're gonna come back to the Epic board early next year, so don't worry, you're not gonna have to wait months for that.
Yeah, look forward to a lot more of that.
Yeah, but for now, Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Imagine if it's just shot off.
Shot is just Jen's head.